Hello everyone and welcome back after a short, brief 2-week hiatus, holidays, and then, I don't know, didn't feel like it. I am back with another episode of Exploder. I'm sure all 10 of you are really excited. I'm realistic about my viewers, my listeners, whatever the hell we want to call them, viewers. I make videos, whatever. But I'm just a little more realistic about it. Anyway, anyone who's listening, anyone who likes the show, thank you for being here. You guys are great, so let's get to it. I talk about the worst of wrestling a lot. I do. And understand, I am a wrestling fan. I want people to understand, I am a wrestling fan. Deep down, when it comes down to it, I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. I started watching wrestling when I was 8 years old. The first match I ever saw was on WWF Superstars on a Sunday, because it was played on, Sunday at like 10 a.m., whatever the hell it was. And my first match I ever saw, of all people, was the Nasty Boys. And of course, it was a Superstars taping, so it was the Nasty Boys versus some jobbers who were accountants and dog catchers in their real life, facing two men who looked like a dog catcher and an accountant. Whatever. Point is, my first match I ever saw was the Nasty Boys, of all people, and I've been hooked ever since, which is amazing when you really think about it. That's your introduction, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna stick around. I'm gonna see how many teeth Jerry Sags is gonna lose over the years, or gain, I don't know. But I am a big fan, but at the same time, you have to understand, the funniest part of wrestling is not the great matches. The Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker, the good ones they had, what was it, 4 singles matches. Ground Zero, 1997, before that became a loaded term. Hell in a Cell at Bad Blood, 1997, a month later. Well, I know, there's one more. There's the casket match they had at Rumble 98, which of course ended Shawn's career for years after that, unfortunately. And then of course there were the 2 WrestleMania matches back to back, which were amazing. The recent tag match, the nostalgia trip gone awry, doing it for the Benjamins, Saudi Arabia will do anything with their crazy money act. Let's not talk about that. But the good matches honestly aren't funny. They're good matches, they're amazing, they're fun to watch, but they're not funny. So when you talk about wrestling, when you talk about the worst wrestling, the worst of it is what makes it fun. That's the funniest part. So I've been watching, unrelated, just on my own. I decided, you know what, I'm gonna watch some old WCW. I have the network finally. I didn't have it for a long time, didn't think I'd use it. I have it now, and God, I love this network. I love it because I watch some of the shows, the Table for Three, the road trip stuff, a little bit of the Legends, things like that. But my favorite is going back and watching The Vault, because WWE has created this almost Bond villain-esque vault of old wrestling footage, from WCW to World Class to AWA to ECW to WCW. Recently, while I'm watching a little bit of ECW, I'm also watching WCW. More particularly, WCW 2000. Even more specific than that, WCW, right now I'm on May of 2000. I'm probably about, I don't know, the 22nd, something like that. I'm about almost through May. And I remember watching this as a kid. I watched it. I was still the guy. I watched WCW to the dying day. I mean, there were people that tuned out there were guys that were like WCW fans, and they just hated WWE because they were more wrestling on WCW, which is true for a long time, except for in the main event, brother. And there were guys who were the WWF fans, and when the WWF took back over in late 97, early 98, then that's over. Then they never went back to WCW. I was the guy who, from Nitro in September of 1995 until the day Vince McMahon showed up, hell froze over, and Jeff Jarrett got fired on the air. I was there. I was at Nitro, and I watched both. So I was one of those people that flipped back and forth. So you'd miss pieces of it. But really, if you're missing Bobby Duncombe Jr. versus Jerry Flynn, are you really missing anything? The answer is no. So I was flipping back and forth, and I would watch these things. And I remember watching WCW in 2000. I didn't know everything. I didn't know every little detail that was going on. I knew, basically the times where Russo was in charge, when Bischoff was in charge, when Bischoff gave his famous if you want to leave, and Raven left. That speech, I knew when that was. I knew when he got sent home, and they brought in Russo, the powers that be, and that didn't work. And then Kevin Sullivan, and that didn't work. And the committee, and that didn't work. And they brought back Russo and Bischoff because 2 guys looking at a sinking ship with a hole in a duct tape, with a roll of duct tape in their hands, they'll make it work. So I watched that. I knew that part, but I don't know, maybe I glossed over. Like, I knew WCW at that time was bad. I didn't realize how bad. Oh my God, I forgot how bad it was. Right now I'm watching, like I said, late May of 2000, and WCW would do worse. They would do way better earlier on, and then they would do a lot worse. And I remember distinctly, and again, by the time I get around to it, maybe it'll be worse than I remember it, but I remember late 2000, where Russo became champion, Bret Hart came back to turn on Goldberg, but it didn't matter because Bret couldn't wrestle anymore because of Goldberg, and then they released him. They released Bret Hart, not Goldberg, obviously. The Natural Born Thrillers, which was basically a group of 7 rookies, all of which are let me think about it. I think one of them's still in the business. One's making, okay, so the Natural Born Thrillers were Mike Sanders, some dude named Reno, who was only there during that and then disappeared again. Chuck Palumbo, who makes motorcycles now. Something like custom motorcycles, whatever, do your thing. Sean O'Hare, who unfortunately has passed on. Sean Stasiak, who is a chiropractor, because that's a natural extension of things. Who else? Is that it? Mark Jindrak. Mark Jindrak was in it. He's actually in Mexico as Marco Corleone, so he's the only one. He's the only one in that whole group who's still in the business. And that was now that was 18 years ago. Keep in mind, but yeah, they were all over. And Mike Sanders was the commissioner, I guess, because at some point in WCW, it was in your contract that everyone was allowed to be the commissioner. I think El Dandy got a week, I'm pretty sure. So I'm joking, but come on, WCW. I rest my case. But I had forgotten how bad it got. Even this early on, even in May of 2000. We're not talking Russo winning world titles. We're talking, oh my goodness, Bischoff and Russo before Bash at the Beach. May going into the Great American Bash where they turned Goldberg heel, which was brilliant, by the way. Comes back from an injury after being gone because he decided, I'm going to punch through a window of a limo. Good job, Goldberg. And look at me heckling a guy from 20 years ago. He's wrong with me. Whatever. So he comes back, big pop, and they go, you know what we're going to do? We're going to immediately turn him heel. Okay. And they realized how bad that was, so they immediately turned him back. But then again, at this time, no one gave a crap. It didn't matter because it was WCW, and nothing mattered. And believe me, I'll get to that. We subtitle Ahmed Johnson promos so you don't have to. It's newsflash. Actor and former Unmovable Object Zeus says he wants to wrestle again. In response, fans want to see him wrestle once. In breaking news, Titus Worldwide has officially disbanded. This is bad news for Titus O'Neil and literally no one else. At Survivor Series, SmackDown won a tag match that didn't matter. Charlotte Flair recreated Ronda Rousey's last MMA fight. Some idiot with a dick signature threw a temper tantrum, and Brock Lesnar had his most exciting match in ever. Former Wrestling World Champion and UFC jobber CM Punk has joined a new MMA league as his color commentator. He'll somehow manage to be 0-2. Daniel Bryan's a heel, Shane McMahon is best in the world, and Nia Jax is heckling people over Twitter. There's no joke, that's just reality. Pierre-Carl Ouellet has signed an exclusive contract with Ring of Honor. Keep an eye out for him. Look it up. Brutus Beefcake left a Canadian tour early, taking advance money with him. This is of course better than the alternative, watching Brutus Beefcake wrestle in 2018. That's going to do it for this time. Let's get back to the show. Now, while WWF had their problems, and believe me, I will get to the darkest, most horrible gobbledygooker moments in wrestling history. I will get to the WWF in due time. But the one thing about WCW was how quickly it went downhill. They were the biggest thing in the world. They were the closest that WWF ever came to bankruptcy. Now I don't know how, I've heard this is true, but again, it's another internet thing. It could be wrong. Don't crucify me if it is. People in the business. But the story was that the WWF was actually taking water coolers out of the offices to try and save money. That's how bad it got. WCW was very close to putting the WWF out of business, and Eric Bischoff's ego grew 3 times that day. And they got so big, they got so arrogant that things started happening. WCW was always a place of chaos, and I think even if you ever hear an account from Eric Bischoff or anyone who worked there, and Eric Bischoff was the guy, and he'll tell you the same story. People that didn't know the product because they worked for Time Warner or Turner Sports in particular were above him, who had nothing to do with the actual process, telling him how he was going to run the company. So when a corporate structure that was just chaotic and things that were just, so WCW was wasn't even controlled chaos. It was just chaos that came onto a couple good ideas and ran with them. So even at its height, it was sort of chaotic. They'd be writing shows while they were still on the air, so that's not good. But it was a show that still ran and was still the top thing. But what amazes me is that as the chaos goes and as they're making it work, as soon as they change, as soon as the shift happened quickly, and they started losing the ratings. But even then, if you're the number 2 entity in the industry, that's a weird phrase, entity in the industry, that's going to be a rap album name eventually, look it up. But if you're the number 2 company, that's still not bad. I mean, you want to be number 1. WWF wanted to be number 1 in 1997. They weren't, but they were still at times doing okay. WCW came number 2, and they did okay. The problem is not that they became number 2, it's that they became number 2 and they started free falling, just plummeting to earth, like Yokozuna without a parachute and a lead vest on, like just falling quick. That's what started happening. They weren't just losing. They weren't just number 2 and then they got it back and then they lost again and going back. They got number 2 and then it started dropping. They might win a week now and again, and then when they finally lost, they lost and they plummeted to earth. They went from a show that admittedly some of the storylines didn't make sense. I mean, why would Sting and Lex Luger join the Wolfpack? Don't know. It was popular, that's why. But, it worked out, and then they got back together. The Wolfpack did with the Elite and that whole thing. And if you look at it, it really didn't make a lot of sense, but again, they were riding the wave and it worked. And then when they lost, they started plummeting and everything just went all to hell. And now WCW was sort of without a direction. If I had to guess, probably around February, March of 1999. They did the angle with, well, first of all, they added David Flair to the NWO. And David Flair at this point was a nobody. He was Ric Flair's son, but he wasn't even in the business. They just brought him in, immediately put him in the NWO, put him with Torrie Wilson, that lucky bastard, and made him a member of the NWO, the whole thing. And Hogan and Flair fought for, I'm assuming, the millionth time. And this time, Flair got control of WCW for the first time. And the NWO at this point sort of fell apart because it was really Nash and Hogan, and it just sort of fell apart. So by the time you hit, and there was never really a breakup moment. It was just sort of something's faded out because it had been done so long. They had nothing left, so that when they finally did NWO 2000, it was like a rehash of an old concept instead of like a rebirth of something that was already there. But I digress. So they did this Hogan versus Flair thing, which was of course the match where Hogan couldn't win by pinfall, but Ric Flair could because, you know, WCW. And then Hogan got injured and Diamond Dallas Page became champion. And it's not a knock on Diamond Dallas Page. He was a really hard-working guy, straight up company man, but he wasn't necessarily a main event guy, and to make him a 3-time world champion in a company that's already losing its mojo, so to speak, was not good. So then we end up in the summer where they bring back Sid Vicious, and Macho Man's on his tail end. He's on his tail end run, which people didn't know at the time, but he was. And you know, he brought in his Miss Madness and Medusa and the whole thing. But then it sort of lost steam, and then finally in August of '99 they bring Hogan back because, you know, Hogan comes back and immediately wins world title again. And then what do you know? Hogan versus Nash again. Oh my god. You know, like Hogan versus Flair, Hogan versus Nash, Hogan versus Savage. I mean, it's like John Cena and Randy Orton. How many times have we seen that match? Oh my god, if I see that, I hope I don't, but if I see that one more time, I'm going to RKO myself. I'm going to find a way to do that. So WCW was stale. So by August, September, they were losing. They brought in Kiss. They got the Kiss Demon, which was originally Bryan Adams, and then it became Dale Torborg, and it went as well as a guy dressed up like Gene Simmons in wrestling would go. And then Bischoff gets sent home, and then Russo's brought in, and Russo comes in and just throws every dumb idea he ever has at the wall, and it does ratings where they went up like a half a point. So yay. And then he gets sent home because they're like, wow, this guy's a lunatic. And then it's Bill Bush, Kevin Sullivan's booking again, and Kevin Sullivan does such a great job. He immediately loses 4 guys right out the gate, the Radicals, and just doesn't do well. There's a committee. The committee doesn't go well, and then we start the 2000s. Then we start with, they decide, you know what, like I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring back Bischoff and Russo, throw them together, because 2 guys who don't know each other, one of which has failed after a long successful period, sort of lost what his creative spirit or whatever he had going for him. The other guy, who never had it to begin with, who just came in and started throwing, almost literally started throwing crap on the wall and seeing what worked, like he was painting or something. Like he's one of those weird, like Russo at this time was like one of those guys who just threw feces at a canvas and sold it as a piece of art, and no one else gets it, but he thinks it's the greatest thing since Van Gogh. That's pretty much what Russo was. So they thought, hey, if we take these 2 together, this will be great. It was not great. Starting with the first one, which was May 3rd? I think it was May 3rd was the official first day of a new era. And that was the one where they have everyone in WCW, which was not everyone in WCW, mind you, because WCW, I believe at one point employed as wrestlers, employed over 240 people. So even if, like, I'm not saying that's when this was, but even the guys that were in the ring was full, and there were guys in the back, and I guarantee that wasn't all. That was just everybody who they could fit on TV. You know, they'd have to buy the arena out and just have all the wrestlers sit in the seats. I mean, they'd have an audience that way, but still, like, they just filled the ring with everybody, and this is the one where they came in and they hugged and the whole gig, Russo and Bischoff did, and they had all the champions vacate all their title. Hardcore, tag team, US, world, cruiserweight. Am I missing anything? I mean, at one point, everyone had a championship, didn't they? So whoever had a championship, they vacated all of them because they were going to reset, and the tag titles ended up on Buff Bagwell and Shane Douglas, which is probably one of the craziest combinations of people I've ever seen in my life. I don't know. Terry Funk won the hardcore title because, well, that makes sense. And then Sid lost the title, and then Jeff Jarrett juggled it. I don't know. Jeff Jarrett got it, then Sid had it, and then, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So they dropped the belt, and then what followed was just week after week of television that made no sense. If you've ever watched a bad Raw, and And as I've heard, some recent Raws were not that great. But even the worst Raw in 2018 cannot measure to the Nitros of 2000. They're not even close. Oh my god. I mean, heck, by like 2001, by like the last few months of the company's existence, they made more sense. They actually started having a little bit of consistency. I mean, it's a little off, but it was still a little more consistent than this period. Mid to late 2000 was just the Wild West. It was, titles changed hands weekly. The world title, by the way, went from person to person to person to person to person. You know who the most consistent champion in the WCW at the time was? Terry Funk, the hardcore belt. They made a point of Terry Funk keeping the hardcore title through all these random BS matches with Ralphus and Norman Smiley and the Mamalukes. You remember them? No, you don't. And Eric Bischoff, of all people, because that was, blockbuster crap. And all these people, they made a point of Terry Funk winning the belt week in and week out. The world title changed hands a lot more. See, in the WWF at the time, you had Crash Holly defending the hardcore belt in the 24/7 rule on, Chuck E. Cheese ball pit, in his hotel room, at baggage claims, in Mae Young's, well, I'm not going to say where in Mae Young, but the point is, they were defended all over the place, but the world title stayed consistent. It was always on a top guy. In WCW, the opposite way. The hardcore belt was consistent, and the world title was just thrown around like a hot potato infected with gonorrhea. Just all over the place. Anyway, so as the titles being switched around, every match was considered, not really considered a hardcore, but the announcers put over week after week, and to their credit, was their job. They were told to do this, but they were told week in and week out to put over that this was a new era in WCW and that they weren't going to be as strict on the rules, sort of in an ECW way, but not ECW, because ECW was, consistent. And although you'd have interference in these matches, it made sense. You wouldn't have Donnie Allen interfering in a Taz match. You'd have Sabu interfering in a Taz match. Or the Dudley Boys interfering in a John Cronus and New Jack match. Why? Because they had a feud going. Made sense, right? Or Spike Dudley would come in. Or you would have these things, but they made sense because they were connected. So they would say things like, oh, it's a new era. We're going to be a little loose with the rules. We're going to get final decisions. Keep in mind, final decision. We're going to get legitimate finishes. And then they proceeded to do some of the most bullshit non-finishes you'll ever see in your entire life. Oh my god. Like, have you ever seen a hardcore match stopped because it got too violent? Yeah, I did. I just watched one between Vampiro and Terry Funk, and the whole bit at the time was Vampiro was getting this huge push because Vince Russo apparently loved Vampiro because he loves like Canadian guys who go to Mexico and dress up like Hot Topic employees and lie a lot. He loves those people. Anyway, Vampiro was doing a whole gimmick with Sting, which went on forever. I don't know if it was like a month or two, but it felt like forever, where he was trying to set people on fire. He was a pyromaniac, and Mark Madden, who I hate as an announcer, Mark Madden would do this bit. He would call him a vampiromaniac. I hate him because, first of all, his name's Vampiro. So you mispronounce his name to make it fit this little ad-lib bullcrap. Oh my god, it's a horrible name. Anyway, so they're fighting to the back, and they have the general put a guy through a table that is conveniently there. It's him and Terry Funk, yada yada yada. He goes out. Apparently, Vampiro drove a gas truck to the building, the big tanker types, and he decides he's going to spray fuel on top of Terry Funk. Then he goes to the truck, opens up the truck, the little cab on the little hatch on the cab, and in that hatch of a fuel tanker, mind you, was a little acetylene like a handheld torch. Now, who the hell, if you're driving a tanker filled with fuel, why would you have a blowtorch? I'm just going to call it right now. Why would you have it? That sounds like the most dangerous job since Grizzly Bear Rodeo Clown. Like, that seems stupid, right? Whatever. So he goes and tries to set fire to Terry Funk, who is now covered, and as is the parking lot, covered in this gasoline, quote unquote. He decides he's gonna light him up, and right before he does, Sting comes up from behind the truck and interferes and stops it. The referee, in a hardcore match, mind you, just declares it a it's a no contest. It doesn't exist. I didn't think the bell rang. I think they just went, let's go to the next segment. That was it. That was the whole show. There was just, next segment. That's insane. That was a hardcore match. That's a hardcore match. Keep that in mind. But it didn't matter because nothing mattered. And here's the thing: as soon as they went, oh, the match is over, and they went off, they went to the next thing. That was the biggest problem. That was another problem with WWE at this time. And keep in mind, I'm still in May. I am in May. I am in 1 month. This is right now. I'm on, I think, the 4th show of May. This is all in the 1 month. I'm further I get, probably the more I'm gonna rant on this. Nothing mattered. Every segment was do a segment, boom, go to the next thing. They one time interrupted a segment with Ric Flair. Ric Flair's doing a promo calling out Vince Russo, and he calls the promo. In the middle of his promo, they cut backstage. Don't say nothing. They just cut backstage, and Sting's walking out to his rental car, and his rental car is on fire, which of course is implied that it's Vampiro's fault. You know, they don't say anything. They then cut back to the ring where Ric Flair's still talking. They are interrupting segments to do other segments that they don't explain, and then get back to the original segment. That was WCW. This is a live television show, by the way. Live. This isn't a tape mistake. This is live. They're like, go to Sting with the fire. Okay, back to Flair. Boom. They don't talk about it. They don't explain it. And we're back. And that's the other problem. The angles didn't make any sense. Now, Sting and Vampiro, as dumb as it was with the fire thing, which set up to their lovely Human Torch match where Vampiro finally got his revenge and set fire to a stunt double, to a stuntman who dove off the screen and was immediately put out. So, good job. That was actually consistent compared to some of this other crap. Ric Flair had a feud with David Flair. David Flair, see if you can follow this, because I'm watching it and I really can't. David Flair sees Vince Russo as his father. Oh, that's shudder-inducing. He likes him as his father, and he doesn't like Ric Flair, because Ric Flair was always on the road and all these things. He was out there being Ric Flair. So, it sets up to where Ric Flair has a world title match at the Great American Bash against Jeff Jarrett, who's the champion in all this chaos. Then, Ric Flair decides, you know what? I want to face David Flair at Great American Bash. So instead of getting the world title shot, I'm going to face my son. And if I lose, I'll retire. But I still want my world title match. So I'm going to challenge, he doesn't even challenge. He just says, I'm going to get my world title match against Jeff Jarrett tonight on the night where he does this on. And Jeff Jarrett agrees. So this guy just books himself into a world title match. And here's WCW. Here is WCW in a nutshell. He wins. So now he wins. So now Ric Flair, who just books himself in a world title match that night on TV, Jeff Jarrett just goes, all right, he loses. So Ric Flair wins the title. He goes to Thunder that Wednesday. He has basically they make it look like a heart attack because the bullcrap, because they tried the heart attack thing a year before. They go, oh, okay, it was a brain aneurysm. And then they get really vague. They're like, well, it could have been a brain aneurysm. I don't know. So they strip him of the title. Vince Russo does, because, you know, why not? They then hand the belt. Keep this in mind, too. Hand the belt back to Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett is now champion again, doing nothing on his own. It's like TNA. He then loses the belt at the next Thunder to Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash turns around the next Monday on Nitro, friends with Flair at this point. He hands the title over to Ric Flair. Says, you never lost it, here's the belt. So now, the world title has changed hands twice in a period of a couple weeks by someone just handing it over, and they go, all right, it's yours now. People lost their minds when Triple H got the world title, the world championship handed to him by Eric Bischoff to give Raw a world champion. They lost their mind. One, because they hate Triple H, whatever. But the other one, because they just gave it to him, right? Which they actually integrated into a storyline like, oh, you were the chosen champion, all that bullcrap. This happened twice. In a period of 2 weeks. He handed it to him. Like, oh, okay, I'm the champion now. Flair then proceeds to lose the title that night to Jeff Jarrett. This is 2 weeks of programming. I just described in the title, just the trade off of the world title. World title. Don't give me this David Arquette crap. World title. I just described the world title being handed over to someone. Just here you go, twice. And when Kevin Nash handed it back to Ric Flair, which years before would have been a big deal, it would have been a controversy, it would have been at least give him a promo. It was like Ric Flair came to the ring with Scott Steiner and Kevin Nash. He did this big promo on Russo. Afterwards, Kevin Nash grabbed the mic and basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, but this is pretty much what he said. Hey, Nature Boy, you didn't lose the belt. I don't feel right having it. You never lost it, so here's the belt back. That's it. That was the whole thing. It wasn't a big thing. It wasn't this drawn out speech. It was just, here's your belt. All right, you're champion now. That's it. That's the whole segment. That was like it. And then the biggest problem, now there's more, and again, I'll get to more. I don't want to make this like a 4-hour thing, and I don't want to go piece by piece on the show, because God knows there's enough people doing that. I think Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez and the Brian and Vinny show do a great job of it. I listen to it, and I think they're great. if you're a wrestling fan, you know who I'm talking about. They do a really good job. So I'm not going to go segment by segment, but I'm just going at the most absurd stuff off the top of my head because it's just amazes the crap out of me. The worst part of it all, when they said they were going to have definitive winners and they were going to let the rules go, what that means is while the WCW or the WWF hardcore division was sort of a 24/7, anyone could come in, even one of the hoes won the hardcore title at some point, a little bit of loose, a little bit of comedy. In WCW, what that meant was everyone is in every segment ever. Every segment. Someone like Daphne. See if you can follow this one. And again, if you're keeping score, good luck. Daphne, at one point, Chris Candido, rest in peace. Chris Candido was the WCW Cruiserweight Champion after the rebrand, after everyone dropped the belts and you guys got it because, progress. Chris Candido is the champion and he has Tammy Lynn Sitch, who I've covered in other episodes, not about wrestling. And he comes to the ring and says, we're the best couple in wrestling and we're gonna put the belt, your Cruiserweight belt, I'm gonna put the Cruiserweight belt up against any other couple in WCW. Any other couple, what they say. So the announcer's sort of bewildered. I'm at home watching this again, secondhand, years later. I'm bewildered at this. They're gonna put up the Cruiserweight title in a tag match, in an intergender tag match. So who comes out but the probably only other couple in the company at the time, Daphne and Crowbar. And Daphne and Crowbar are grandfathered into this New Blood angle. Don't get me started on the New Blood versus Millionaires Club thing. Don't even get me started. They're grandfathered in because they were associated with David Flair when all this happened. David Flair at one point was playing the crazy guy plus the regular guy at the same time. So anyway, his crazy friends come to the ring. So Tammy and Chris Candido are also in the New Blood. So you have two people from the same team competing in an intergender tag team match for the Cruiserweight belt. Then Daphne wins. But because it was in a tag match, it went from Chris Candido being the champion to Daphne and Crowbar being the champion. So at this point, the Cruiserweight belt is held by two people, which is not a disqualifier because the same thing would happen later. Yes, it gets worse. Which brings me to my other problem with WCW at this time. Like I've said, everyone was involved in every segment. I count. If you watch the segment, if you have the network, go on these shows. Like I said, I'm in May, but pretty much at this point, go to any month, pick a show at random, throw a dart if you want to destroy your television, but pick a random show. Every segment involves everyone. So like Daphne, after she had that match where she won the Cruiserweight title, she then went to the back. The next segment involved Ric Flair, David Flair, Vince Russo, and Daphne, because Daphne was the fiance of David Flair. So she leaves with the Cruiserweight title. She comes back with a replica of the NWA title and a replica of the WCW title that Ric Flair had brought to the ring weeks before on a promo that really didn't follow. So she comes back carrying three titles, Cruiserweight title and the two replica belts, and she's now the girlfriend of David Flair, who they angled about. If you watch these matches and you watch and everyone interferes, I just got done watching one. The segment at the end, it was Scott Steiner, Kevin Nash, Chuck Palumbo, Sean Stasiak, Vince Russo, Torrie Wilson, Billy Kidman, Horace Hogan, Chronic, Brian Clark, and Brian Adams, they were supposed to be like the WCW's answer to APA. Although the APA, their whole gimmick was they sat around, they smoked cigars, they drank beer, they played cards, and then they beat the crap out of people, right? APA, you saw them drinking beers. Chronic was basically two guys that they always kept making stoner jokes. Oh, they're gonna light one up, Tony. They didn't pot, other than their name was Chronic, and that was it. Their name was Chronic, and they'd make these little puns about smoking things. Oh, they're gonna smoke some, whatever. Chronic comes in, and they're just fighting, and at the end of the segment was 10 people. 10 people started the segment started with, I think, 3. It started with Sean Stasiak, Chuck Palumbo. No, it was I'm getting confused. It was Chuck Palumbo, Mike Awesome, and Kimberly Page. Then Miss Elizabeth came out. Then Lex Luger came out. It was at the end of it, there were 10 people. 10 people in this one segment. And by the way, these are segments where half of those people are going to be on the air 3 or 4 more times that night. It's a 2-hour show. Nitro at this point had gone to 2 hours. They'd gone to 2 hours. And they would squeeze in, a month of television. Like, if I had to guess, they would squeeze in probably at least 2 weeks of television into one show. And they do the same thing on Thunder 2 days later, and they do the same thing on the next Monday on Nitro, and the next thing on the next Thunder. So they would do a month of television in 2 days, and they do another month of television in the next 2 days. I mean, that's what WCW would decide. And this is May. I'm only in May. So like I said, as I go further on where Russo wins the world title, spoiler alert, where Bret Hart comes back for no reason because no match can actually happen, when all that stuff starts happening, I might have another rant. This is just my rant right now about WCW. This is only May. This is only May of 2000. 2000, and my brain hurts. So as bad as WWF can be in 2018, as much as it feels like they're pushing fans away, as much as they push people who may not be the greatest, count your lucky stars that it's not like WCW in 2000, because the minute the WWE, sorry pandas, let's screw the pandas. At the minute that the WWE in 2018 starts looking like WCW in 2000, then you need to worry about bankruptcy, because this is the most god-awful period of time I've ever seen in my life. And I'm amazed. I'm amazed that it goes like this on a weekly basis. And it goes on at this point for another year, almost another year, because they're out by March. So this is another 10 months of this, and I'm in May. And I'm amazed. So that was my rant for this time. If you like what I'm saying, if you don't remember WCW 2000 at that point, if you have the network, go back. Oh my God, go back. Again, it's like a train wreck type thing. It's like a car wreck almost. You want to look away because you know it's bad, but at the same time, you want to remember how bad. I forgot how bad it was. I really did. And looking back, I'm like, oh God, it's worse than I remembered. And I thought it was pretty bad. I didn't have this idea in my head that it was good. I knew it was bad, but it was worse than I ever could imagine. It was worse than I remembered it. So that's the topic of this time. If you have any ideas for a future show, hit me up. My Twitter handle is still Exploder-Pod, P-O-D. I'm on here. Put a message below the video. Get a hold of me however you can. Carrier pigeon. I don't think people use those anymore, and I don't think it would get to me. But the point is, get a hold of me somehow, and I might use it on a future episode. Or I might just keep watching this stuff on the network and lose my mind because my brain hurts. I don't know. Either one. Well, that's going to do it for this show. Thank you for everyone who's stuck with me this far. This is gotta be pushing 40 minutes now. So anyone who's stuck with me so far, thank you. And I'm glad you're a glutton for punishment. I just had to get that off my chest. Until next time, my name's Dan. This is Exploder. Have a good one.